Okay, so I thought I'd have a little go at making a new cardiovascular one. I'll probably again split it into two. So cardiovascular system, I said doddle team, if we get that on the exam, that'd be super. So cardiovascular system, what I want you to have a go at first is, if you were in the session today, I've given you some multiple choice questions. If you're looking at any of these videos and you haven't got the multiple choice questions, please send me an email and I'll just forward them to you. It's obviously a good way just to a really quick check of your knowledge. Advice for multiple choice questions while we're here. You think they're easy because they're giving you options. However, they really can create some doubt multiple choice questions. So my advice for you is, I read a multiple choice question and I write down or think to myself what I think is the answer. So I establish what I think the answer might be before I kick off. I then go down, have a look. Is the one I thought was the answer there? All right. If it is, I'm fairly happy this is going to be the answer. However, I don't just leave it at that. I then am going to go through and process of elimination, get rid of the others. And just check them, so just double check. I'm not going to rush in with my first immediate response, but I'm going to put a little line under that one thinking I think that I'm going to be in here, but then I go through and I just check the other ones, eliminate them one by one, and then when I'm happy, identify the answer. Please never leave multiple choice questions blank. Okay, if in doubt, said narrow it down to the best of your ability, and then have a go. All right, so work your way through them then. Pop me on pause, press play when you're ready to roll. All right. Okay, right, so let's kick off then. So cardiovascular system, lots of key terms just to have a little bit of a look at. Should have your glossaries with you. So have a look at some of these then. Heart rate, number of beats per minute. Number of times the heart beats per minute. Stroke volume, volume of blood ejected from the heart per beat. You might have more detail on some of these than I do. Usually measured in millilitres. Q or CO, cardiac output. Cardiac output is HR times SV. So it's volume of blood. So volume of blood ejected per minute now. Okay. So if you ever change heart rate and stroke volume and you're writing that down in an answer, always pop a Q on the end, because again there's often a mark on the mark scheme for that one. Right, systolic phase. Systolic phase is the contraction phase. So we know when we're dealing with the heart, we have atrial systole and ventricular systole. I write contraction phase. I often think emptying phase because I like to visualise the movement of blood through the heart during the cardiac cycle. Oxygen debt is the amount of oxygen consumed during recovery that is above that which is consumed at rest in the same time. Okay, so you'll often see it on the graph. So I'll show you it. I'll show you that when we get to it. I'll show you how we can tell oxygen debt, and the size of the oxygen debt will tell us the intensity of exercise as well. Diastole, so our relaxation phase of the heart. We have atrial diastole, ventricular diastole. I always think of it as the filling stage, but I don't write that. Arteries carry blood away. A for arteries carry it away. They pump blood under really high pressure, so they're thick muscular walls. The majority of the arteries in the body carry oxygenated blood, with the exception of the pulmonary artery. The major artery we talk about is obviously the aorta, taking oxygenated blood from the heart to the body. Veins carry blood via or towards the heart. Veins typically carry deoxygenated blood, with the exception of the pulmonary vein. Veins carry blood under much lower pressure, because you remember with veins there's nothing pumping the blood back through veins. And as a result of that, they need to have valves to keep blood going in the right direction, stop backflow. Hormonal control, so we know we have three major types of control: neurohormonal, intrinsic, that the exam could ask us about. With intrinsic, we know we've got two types. We've got stroke volume, venous return and temperature. So with hormonal control, as soon as it says hormonal, I think adrenaline. And then I'll look for the other instruction in the question, which is rest or exercise. In the past, they've always been exercise, but we could just see some rest ones in the new exams. So if it is, obviously, I need to reverse whatever I'm saying for exercise. Neurocontrol, I think receptors: chemo, baro, proprio, thermo. Have I forgotten any? I don't think so. Intrinsic control, I'm thinking either venous return or I'm thinking temperature. When I'm doing hormonal control and neural control, I mention both heart rate and stroke volume. When I'm doing intrinsic control, I mention stroke volume if it's venous return. I mention heart rate if it's temperature. Cardiac cycle is the order of events that takes place during one beat of the heart. Cardiac cycle has 4 different stages. We have atrial diastole, atrial systole, ventricular diastole, ventricular systole. Myogenic is to do with the fact that the heart can generate its own electrical impulse. Where are we? Hypertrophy, we know, is when muscles enlarge in the heart, called cardiac hypertrophy. We know that the bigger the heart, it's a muscle, the bigger the force of contractions, the bigger the stroke volume can be generated. We know that therefore results in a lower resting heart rate, and we know if the heart rate goes below 60 beats per minute, the term used to describe that is bradycardia. And the conduction system, last but not least, there is the creation or passing of an electrical impulse through the cardiac muscle. And we know there are 4 runners in our conduction system, which we're going to have a little look at in a second. Okay, so there are key terms. Get them all down in your glossary, check them, make sure you're happy with them, and then let's move on together. Okay, so we are looking firstly at the cardiac cycle. So we can see here stage 1 is diastole, stage 2 atrial systole, ventricular systole. Here we've got stage 3. I know we reference 4 stages. Okay. So firstly, atrial diastole. Atrial diastole is when the atria are filling with blood. Now, high grade students, A star students, whenever you're doing a cardiac cycle, if it's a big question, 6 marks, or it's in the essay question, I would also be making reference to things like valves and pressure. However, all students have to make reference to the direction of blood or the movement of blood when you're doing the cardiac cycle, because actually that's what it's ultimately referring to. So I'd start by saying, at the start, atrial diastole occurs, atria are filling with blood. So I've made reference to what's going on now. If I really want to show off, I'll say the AV valves are closed, atrial pressure rises. As atrial pressure rises or increases, the AV valves are then pushed open, so you can see that here, and blood passively, remember I said to you passively means there's no contraction, no energy used to make something happen. So blood passively passes into the ventricles, okay? The ventricles then start to fill with blood, so ventricular diastole has started, even though atrial systole hasn't taken place yet. So don't worry about the order of them. In your answer, pop them down wherever you want. Just make sure you've got your 4 runners in the side that you're ticking off as you go through, okay? What happens then is atrial systole occurs, the atria contract, towards the atria contract, blood, then reference direction of blood, blood is forced into the ventricles, so ventricular diastole is occurring. If I really want to show off, I'll now say the semilunar valves. So semilunar valves, remember, are here, and we've got your aortic valve and your pulmonary valve. They are closed, you can see them closed here. The AV valves are closed and blood starts to fill inside the ventricles. At that point then, ventricular systole occurs. This is obviously contraction of the ventricles. Ventricular pressure then rises. The AV valves are closed, so we can see, sorry, I'm just looking for my mouse because I'm outside in the sun. AV valves are closed. Semilunar valves now are forced open. And the final statement is blood leaves the heart. Always make sure that's your last statement when you're doing the cardiac cycle. So often students don't actually say blood leaves the heart, and that's the ultimate purpose of the cardiac cycle. Okay, so there's our 4-man relay team. As I said, it doesn't really matter which order you've got them in these 2, as long as they're in there. So what I'd now like you to do is have a little look at the conduction system. So my 4-man relay team for the conduction system is at the bottom. Have a quick go on your own now of popping them in the right order. And just say it. Where do you think they are? Check your understanding, and then we'll start to piece them together. Okay? Right, let's have a little look then. Okay, so runner number 1, SA node. Runner number 2, AV node. I also got a bit excited with the animations. Runner number 3 is your bundle of hiss, and your final runner is your pair kind fibres. Okay. So if I got a big 6-mark question, a 5-mark question on how the conduction system affects the cardiac cycle, I'm going to write both of them relay teams in the margin. I might just abbreviate them ADAS as long as I'm happy with them. But like I said, we don't start a question until I know what the answer is going to look like. It just helps me keep my structure. But because I know the knowledge, I know what each of them are called, I wouldn't bother spending time writing their actual name out. But now I need to be able to explain it. So I need to explain how the conduction system causes the cardiac cycle to take place. Okay, so I'm going to start to piece them together for you. So let's start, me personally, again, the order can vary slightly, so don't worry too much about that. Have a go and fact yourself now. Just pop a number next to them in the way in which you describe them. Pop me on pause, talk yourself through it, and then press play on me again and just see how you got on with it. All right? Okay, right, let's have a little look at that then. If this is me, I'm going to start by saying atrial diastole occurs. The atria are filling with blood, so making reference to the blood. Okay, I'd then say the SA node receives an impulse and initiates an electrical impulse that spreads across the walls of the atria. When this impulse spreads across the walls of the atria, atrial systole occurs. The walls of the atria contract. Now, I didn't necessarily have to do it in that order. I could have said atrial diastole occurs, atria fill with blood, atrial pressure rises like we did before, AV valves are open, blood passively passes into the ventricles. Really, really impressive if you can do that. All right, but I'm going to carry on from now. So the SA node has initiated the impulse, the walls of the atria have contracted, blood now is being forced into the ventricles, so ventricular diastole is occurring. Sorry, I'm doing that thing with my mouse again. I've entirely lost it. Oh, here you go. Ventricular diastole occurs. Okay. The SA node then sends the impulse to the AV node. The AV node, remember, delays the impulse to allow the walls of the atria to finish contracting. Okay. The AV node then passes the impulse to the bundle of His, which is located in the septum of the heart. The impulse then reaches the Purkinje or Purkinje fibres, which are in the walls of the ventricles. They electrocute the ventricles, causing atrial systole to occur, ventricular systole to occur. When ventricular systole occurs, ventricular pressure rises, AV valves are closed, semilunar valves are snapped open, and blood leaves the heart. Press pause on that, go back over it, listen again until you're happy, and see how you get on. Okay? Okay, your next bit then of the heart is to do with values. Now, I'm not spending any massive amount of time on values. I won't have done in class either. Values are pretty straightforward and it's just a memory game. It's a case of you just spending enough time with them, revisiting them, checking your knowledge, so that you've got them. Again, with values, do not forget your units, okay? So we've got heart rate, stroke volume, cardiac output, trained and untrained athletes, 18 possible marks there. Draw yourself a quick table now, or if you've got the notes that I gave in lesson, have a go at drawing them out for yourself and see how you get on. All right, when you're ready, press play on me and we'll go and check your answers. Okay? All right then, let's have a little flick over them together. So, values. Heart rate, BPM, stroke volume, millilitres, cardiac output in litres per minute. So obviously make sure you make that conversion between mils and litres per minute. Or I can use millilitres per minute for cardiac output, or I can use litres for stroke volume, whatever you want, as long as you've got the correct units in there and you make any necessary conversions. So we can see key things to point out. A trained athlete we know has a lower resting heart rate than an untrained athlete because their heart has experienced cardiac hypertrophy from training and they have a much greater stroke volume. So you're looking at, top athletes, Mo Farah, Tour de France athletes. I remember seeing something about Steve Redgrave's stroke volume. I remember seeing one where a trained athlete, I think he was a triathlete, had a resting heart rate of something ridiculous like 28 beats per minute, which is obviously just outrageous. But it's just showing you really that heart is so efficient, that cardiovascular system is so efficient, that stroke volume must be so large that heart has to beat, less than half the amount of times in a minute as an untrained athlete. Obviously that's going to be positive. It's obviously going to indicate that somebody's got a healthy heart. All right, reduce the risk of CHD, coronary heart disease in later life. So your trained athlete has a lower resting heart rate and much bigger stroke volume, so they can generate the same cardiac output at rest. Maximum heart rate is the same, 220 minus your age. Stroke volume, maximal stroke volume can be reached at sub-maximal intensities. So if you look at stroke volume, it is the same at sub-max and max for a trained athlete and the same as sub-max and max for an untrained athlete. Not the same as each other then. Okay, and if you remember rightly, that's because when we do the stroke volume graph, stroke volume increases in line with exercise intensity as exercise begins, but then it tends to plateau at about 40 to 60% of its max. And remember, we looked at Starling's law, and obviously how you increase stroke volume, we need to increase the stretch of the heart. And when we begin exercising, heart rate and stroke volume are both increasing in line with exercise intensity. And that's fine at the start because the SA nodes increase its firing rate, venous returns increase, temperatures increase, adrenaline's released, all of that's going on. However, as we continue to exercise, we get to a stage where as heart rate continues to increase, the heart is beating quicker and quicker and quicker and quicker and quicker. Stroke volume can't continue to increase because the heart hasn't got time to fill. So it ultimately has a choice: we increase heart rate or we increase stroke volume, and it's more efficient to increase the heart rate. So stroke volume plateaus at around 40 to 60% max. So that's why we'll see this pattern here. The other thing to note is during maximal and submaximal intensity exercise, a trained athlete generates a bigger cardiac output than an untrained athlete. And obviously that means more oxygenated blood's travelling around the body, increased energy production therefore by the aerobic system, decreased dependency on the anaerobic system, so we will delay the anaerobic threshold, we'll delay obla. You ultimately know that's going to delay fatigue, and then I'm going to make that reference to performance at the end. That's going to improve the quality of performance for somebody like a midfield player because they're not going to tire as early in the game. Alright, so there are your values. Again, like I said, just go over them. You can get calculations. Remember, 5% of the marks are from qualitative data, so I could see graphs, I could see equations, any of that. So we'll have a little look at some of them now. So first graph here, I can see is heart rate. Whenever I'm seeing this line going diagonally across the graph, I know that means that something is increasing linearly or in line with exercise intensity. So heart rate is increasing in line with exercise intensity. Mathematicians, you'll have another word than me. Is it proportionally? I don't know. I'm not a mathematician. Right, but you can see here to max values if the intensity of exercise is maximal, 220 minus age. Alright, your next graph here, if you have a little look at this graph, if I was to cover the bottom, I tried to do it with my hands on the screen, you're not going to see that. So if we have a little look at this, we have to work out here which of these are the trained and untrained athletes. You just pause me for 10 seconds and see whether you can identify if heart rate is in blue, stroke volume is in like, I mean, that looks salmon to me. Pink, shall we go with? Not important. Identify which one of them is indicating, is representing a trained athlete, and which one's representing an untrained athlete, please. Okay, right, let's see. This one for you here would be representing an untrained athlete. Reason being, a greater proportion of the cardiac output is coming here from heart rate than it is on this second bar. Okay, so I can see here that heart rate is accounting here for half of the cardiac output, where on this second one, the majority of the contribution is coming from stroke volume, and we know that trained athletes have a much greater stroke volume because they've experienced cardiac hypertrophy, so they don't need to generate as big a heart rate to achieve the same cardiac output. Alright, so I could get a question like that. This is a really common graph you'll see in class would be lows. So heart rate response to what intensity exercise, I hear you say? Moderate. How do you know it's moderate? Because there's a plateau. Alright, so if I get asked to draw this, the 2018 AS exam has this exact question in. I've just made an Instagram video on it for you. So we'll see here, resting heart rate is around 60 beats per minute. Before exercise begins, I can see an increase here. That is called our anticipatory rise. How do we get an anticipated rise if exercise hasn't begun? Okay, it's obviously with the release of adrenaline. Adrenaline stimulates the SA nodes, increasing its firing rate. And I said to you, it's speeding up that relay team, so it's becoming Team Jamaica now. All right. As exercise begins, then we get a rapid increase in heart rate, and that's because our neuroreceptors now detecting decreased oxygen levels, increased CO2 levels, temperature is rising. The CCC stimulates the sympathetic nervous system. Everything now starts to speed up heart rate. Then, because it's moderate intensity exercise, I'm going to see a plateau. This is when oxygen transportation is meeting demand. So I mentioned to you before about the oxygen debt. I'm not sure if I've got that graph, but I'm going to show you it here. At this point, when it plateaus, that's when we're saying, so imagine here I'm running at 10 kilometres an hour on the treadmill. I know that's probably difficult to imagine. It's difficult for me too. All right. But at this point here, which we've got, is roughly 150 beats per minute. 150 beats per minute, the heart is providing enough oxygen to the muscles to provide enough energy to sustain that activity. So if I look at this here, from this point, from minute 1, if I was to draw across like that, okay, when does it plateau? If I say 14 minutes for ease here, from minute 10 to minute 14, I wasn't providing enough oxygen to meet the energy demand. All right, so if I draw a line up here from the start of exercise and across to meet the plateau, and I was to shade this area in, that is indicating the oxygen debt. The bigger that oxygen debt, the higher the intensity of exercise. So in your booklet, I have 2 graphs for you, and I've said which of these is high intensity and which of them is low. In fact, I think it's on the energy systems booklet. That's how you would know the size of the oxygen debt. All right. And then after exercise, there are 2 stages of recovery. We have the rapid decrease in heart rate and then a slower decrease towards resting values. That is to repay the oxygen debt. Okay, so the bigger the oxygen debt, the longer the recovery. Okay, so next graph. What is this graph showing then? You can see it's heart rate, but what intensity of exercise must that be? Okay, right, hopefully you were shouting at your screen then that that is maximal intensity exercise. How do I know? Well, I know because there's no plateau. Heart rate has had a rapid increase as exercise has began. See me anticipated rise there. See me rapid increase, and then there is a slower increase. It's not a steep. See the gradient of that line? It's not a steep. It's a slower increase towards maximal values. The only thing that will stop that heart rate from continuing to rise, well, one or 2 things, is the intensity of exercise decreases. So I've been doing a sprint, I'm breaking away from midfield to try and join in the attack in football. Play breaks down, and then going to jog to recover back to position to sit back into the middle. So then I'd see a decrease in their heart rate. Usain Bolt, the activity stops, he's finished the 100-metre sprint. Or I reach max. Alright, and then again is my 2 stages of recovery. You'd expect it to take longer to recover, its intensity was higher. Okay, so next graph then, for us to have a little look at, what is that indicating heart rate and what's the intensity of exercise here? Okay, well hopefully you're looking at that and you can identify that that is varying intensities of exercise. So really good examples of that would be somebody like, I was thinking a netball player is a great example. A netball goal shooter, a centre wouldn't be. A netball goal shooter would be a really good example. So here, she is trying to get free, she's breaking, the players all in the attacking third, she's working really hard, she gets her shot off, ball is returning to the centre third. It's not her team centre. Sorry about the helicopter. It's not her team centre. The ball's down defensive end and she's just recovering. She's got nothing to do. Heart rate's dropping. Ball's coming back down court. It's peaking again. Play breaks down, and you get the gist. It might be just somebody like a boxer might experience this. A centre forward in football, a goalkeeper in football is another good one. Have a little think about some other sporting examples for each of these, so you're equipped with them. Okay, question time, cardiovascular system, 10 questions. Pop me on pause once you see the questions. Put your timer on for 10 minutes. Do not do that with a timer. If you don't want to answer the questions fully, you just want to bullet point them, maybe just pop a timer on for 6 minutes or so. If you want to do an audio, even better. Less writing. We don't need to keep writing. We've done enough. So let's have a little look. So explain the role of adrenaline on heart rate prior to and during a 400 metre race. Okay, so that question clearly splits into two. It's 3 marks, right? So I want to attack both parts of that question. Next one. Figure 2 shows the changes in stroke volume and heart rate from rest to maximal exercise. Calculate the cardiac output when heart rate is 180 beats per minute. Show you working, right? So I'd always put a formula in there and then the values you're calculating as well, right? Don't forget your calculator for the exam. Describe how the heart conduction system controls the contraction and relaxation phases of the cardiac cycle. So it's referencing both cardiac contraction and relaxation. So without referencing both in your answer, you won't get the marks. All the marks anyway, sorry. So be prepared for that. So pop me on pause, timer on, have a little go at them, and then press play when you're ready to return. Okay? Alright then, we are going to return and have a little look at the mark schemes for these questions. So first one, explain the role of adrenaline prior to and during. Split them, 2 separate paragraphs, subheadings if you wish to. You want to be saying, prior to activity, adrenaline is released from the adrenal gland and it activates or increases the firing rate of the SA node, causing the anticipatory rise. Okay. During, obviously, this increased firing rate of the SA node is going to lead to a rapid increase in heart rate. That mark scheme is a little bit more, it's a bit more simplistic than I was expecting. Okay, so if we're having a little look at this graph, we should have been going to 180. You can see the heart rate chart is over here. So 180, go across, find the line, come down to stroke volume. Stroke volume's at approximately 120 there. And we know Q equals SV times HR. So we've got 180 times 120, and I cannot forget my units, all right? This is in millilitres, so be very careful if you're going to convert it to litres, or leave it in millilitres, entirely up to you. Okay? And then our next question, describe how the conduction system controls the contraction and relaxation phases of the cardiac cycle. So again, feel free to put me on pause and look through that mark scheme. Pay attention to instructions in your mark schemes and your past paper question packs, please. Submax of 4 for contraction phase. I said to you, it won't let you get all the marks unless you've referenced relaxation phase. So must hit 0.7, 8 or 9 for max marks. Might add a look at that. 0.7 repolarisation occurs. No way in the world would I have said that. 8, atria filled with blood. Well, do you know what? That would have been my very first statement. Atria filled with blood, atrial diastole occurs. So I would have made sure I had hit all the marks here. 9, atria pressure rises. And blood passively passes into the ventricles. I might have done that one, but easier one to miss. Okay, but I've got atrial diastole at the start, so I'd have been absolutely fine. Alright then, well, hopefully that was of some use to you. I will try and make a vascular system one, but good luck with your revision. Right, bye-bye.